the important thing about Me Too is to say, is to understand victimization.
Yes.
You know, and I wrote that article, Me Too, ... and, you know, where I told a couple of my stories related to Me Too, that are personal to me, things that happened to me. And the point of doing that was to draw the distinction between, you know, on the one hand, people who have clearly been harmed, in the kind of way that the harm can't be mitigated by my attitude towards it, right? So certainly, you know, ongoing harassment would be that. Certainly any kind of assault would be that. And then the other thing, which is basically being on the receiving end of offensive, gittish, and crass behavior. Now, those two things are very different. However, since writing that article, and I stand by everything in that article, I've been thinking more about it. More than thinking about it, I've started talking to more women, younger women, to ask them their experiences, their everyday experiences, and their experiences on things like dating apps, right? So basically, how men that they don't, what's their kind of normal experience of men that they don't know, typically day to day, week to week, month to month. Are they on the receiving end of men being crass, gittish, oafish, and offensive? And I've got to say, I'm kind of astonished by the extent to which they are. And I think it is, based on my very limited anecdotal data, and I know that the plural of anecdote isn't data, I get that, but based on some of the conversations I've had, you know, it is somewhat a function of how women hold themselves. But there's an awful lot of men, an awful lot, more than I realized, and this is why I'm glad I spoke to them, that I know, who comes down to this: they have no manners. They just have no manners. And I think if we're talking about, like, we're noticing it in the realm of sexual offense, sexual, call it assertiveness, although it's worse than that. I mean, sexual aggression, right? We notice it in the realm of sexuality, because, but to think that the problem is about sexual aggression, I think, is to mistake what the fundamental problem is, which is there's a lot of men who just think it's okay to disrespect people. And it just comes out sexually because men are sexual and they have sexual urges. And so it comes out in all kinds of ways, but that's the one that's the most obvious and maybe most unpleasant. But I think these men have something more fundamental missing. It's not a sexual pathology. It's you need to learn how to behave. It's a failure of mothers and fathers in their way they're bringing up these sons. But also, I want to own a failure among men in that what we're not doing is putting down these men who exhibit this sexually aggressive, disrespectful behavior. Not because it's sexually disrespectful, but just because it's disrespectful, and disrespecting a woman, or indeed another man, is not masculine. It is the opposite of what we should hold masculinity up to be. And moreover, we need to put these men down. And you asked me if I'd ever called anybody stupid. Watch me. As stupid, because if you are one of these Weinstein people or whatever, you know, who want to get something sexual from a woman you're attracted to, you should have enough mental acuity to realize that this repeated way of trying to get it, this offensive way, this aggressive way, it fails. It doesn't get you what you want. So if for no other reason, men should want to hang out with men who aren't that stupid. And I think what we need, I think maybe the thing we're missing in our culture is a positive notion of masculinity against which we can look at that aggressive behavior and say, that's not masculinity at all. That's the opposite. If anything, you maybe could call it beta masculinity or gamma or you know, masculinity. But it's not healthy masculinity. And I think we've written out of our culture a positive form of masculinity. So we're only talking about masculinity when we're talking about the toxic form. And that's the problem, because it's like I think, speaking to women recently, it's almost like males in our culture, and I'm going to crassly generalize, have bifurcated into two groups. A big group of guys who just are scared to even be men, right? Because masculinity is, it is being trained out of us as a cultural norm now. And so then you have this smaller group, I'm nearly done. You have this smaller group who, without knowing how to be a man positively, are a man in the worst possible way, in a way that I want to say is not masculine at all. So we need to have more masculinity in our culture, not less, and then say that that's what these Weinsteins, what these Louis C.K.'s are doing, which is just treating someone rudely is not male. That's not masculine. It's something else.
There's a false notion of masculinity because men who are generally not masculine and want to be masculine try to be masculine, and they do that by being aggressive.
Aggressive, exactly. But
people who are truly masculine in my sense is very humble. And I say this in terms of, I like to think of MMA fighters because I watch MMA a lot. And I watch a lot of their post-fight speeches and I listen to what they say. And there are a lot of fighters who will make excuses when they lose. And they will say, well, I lost because of this. I lost because of that. He couldn't really beat me. There's a fighter named Nick Diaz who all of his fights are very close because he fights in a way where he doesn't try to win the scorecard. He tries to win the fight. And a lot of times he will end up kind of winning the fight a little bit, but losing on the scorecards because he doesn't care about checking kicks because he'll say like, well, those kicks don't even hurt me. Why would I check them? They don't hurt. They're pussy kicks. They don't do anything to me. But it's like, well, the judges are going to still score those points. So in a close fight, you're always going to lose because you're never. So, but after his fight, he always has the excuse of, I could have kept going for 10 more rounds. I wasn't even hurt. I could have beat him. And then the one time he legitimately lost, the other guy was on steroids. And then the announcer, Joe Rogan, was like, okay, that's a pretty serious claim. Why didn't you bring that up before the fight if you knew it? Why are you waiting till after you lose? And it's because they try to be you can tell they're insecure. They don't want to admit that they lost.
And I want to say the same of, you've got to be morally lacking, which is not not healthily masculine. And you've got to be lacking security, also, which is not healthily masculine.
Yes.
To be exhibiting the kind of behaviors that we've been seeing under the Me Too, phenomenon. And the reason I started asking women about their experiences is just, I was genuinely surprised by the sheer number of stories. It's like, my God, these men are everywhere. Are we?
Because they're aggressive. But there is another fighter his name is Rampage Jackson, and he earned my respect. I think when someone is truly very masculine is when they can earn the respect of other men who look at them and like I respect you as a person. And that doesn't happen very often when another man will look at a man and be like, I respect you. Men really have to earn each other's respect in my experiences. I'm very distrustful of people until they earn my respect first. And it's the hardest to do. Women can earn my respect a lot more easily than men can. But Rampage Jackson immediately did it because he fought a fight that was kind of close, but he kind of did lose. He kind of did lose. He lost the fight to Lyoto Machida. And usually when fighters win a decision by the judges gave them a bad decision, they'll be like, it was a close fight, but I came out the victor. I won. It's not up to me, it's up to the judges, and I think I did enough, and the judges thought I did enough. Rampage said when Joe Rogan came up to him and asked him about the fight, he said, man, I got my ass kicked. I got to be honest with you, Joe Rogan. I don't know how they awarded me that fight, because Lyoto kicked my ass for 3 rounds. And that showed a lot of security in himself, belief in his ability, knowledge of why he lost, knowledge of how he could win in the future. And a lot of other fighters too, they don't make excuses. They'll be like, I'm taking this loss like a man. I lost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And that goes to your point
that
about
carries over
to Louis C.K. at the beginning, right? That
yes.
he kind of, and you also talked about respecting a man, winning the respect of other men, and kind of a flip side of that coin that I've also been thinking about recently is, maybe I think as men we need to turn around and say to these guys, wow, that's really pathetic. Right,
yeah.
like going off into a rehabilitation center, or being, I noticed, Jon Stewart was asked about the Louis C.K. thing, and he said, I've been trying to think about it. I've dealt with people with addiction, and so he was looking at C.K.'s behavior as a kind of a pathology. He was pathologizing it. Right? He was thinking about it in terms of addiction and such like. And I get that, and maybe there's a place for that. But I think the first place to go is just go, my God, that's pathetic. And we as men should let other men know that they lose their standing in the social hierarchy, in the male hierarchy, that they become beta in the eyes of all the other men. And we don't, it's almost like we give it too much. We pay it too much attention. If we do anything more than that. Because at the end of the day, it's a crisis of decency, right? A lot of the things that I think women deal with they're just rude. They simply shouldn't happen because they're just rude.
Yeah, they start out as a lack of respect and decency, and then they spiral and snowball into to these horrible stories. And
but the lack of respect is enough.
Yes.
Like, most of them don't spiral. See, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, there's a lot of them that don't. You're right.
Yeah, it's like I think it's an everyday for certain women who are maybe faintly attractive. I don't think they have to be like, a model to be on the receiving end of pathetic men that just haven't been taught how to treat people. And I'm thinking that, what we need to do is see, here's a really interesting problem, I think. Right? A lot of the folks who are really about the Me Too, obviously there's a big overlap between let's say folks who are maybe third wave feminists, and so there's a lot of this idea that masculinity is kind of inherently dangerous, that kind of attitude, and a lot of that is in the pot with men and women are more or less the same. It's all socialization. And we want to kind of play down what it is to be a man, inherently what it is to be a man. And I think we need to go the other way. I think we need to say to a man, here's what it means to be a man.
Or just to be masculine. Because there are instances where women are more androgynous.
Sure, but you see where I'm going with it. I see where
you're going.
See, once we say you're a man and you're different from a woman, that explains why, whereas I as a man might like to receive a pic of a woman's vagina on my second Tinder message, right? A woman isn't going to want to receive a pic of my genitalia on the second Tinder message. And for me as a man to understand why that is, why that's offensive, somebody needs to teach me that men and women are different and how.
Well,
we've got to talk about that. We're so different.
We are different, but
they don't realize how offensive they're being.
But we're different based on other people's behavior. So, for example, if you were getting pictures of women sending you nude pictures of themselves every single day with multiple people, then after a while, you would become desensitized and you would get sick of it.
But that's a different thing. Like, a man is never going to find it offensive if a woman that he's kind of excited about sends him sexual pictures. A woman is, right? If it's early on in correspondence, there's a fundamental difference there. And we're talking about causing offense. And, and we can't, if we can't talk about the experience of being a man and the experience of being a woman, how they're different, then we can't get to why that's offensive, and we can't get genuinely, therefore, to why we shouldn't do it.
Yes, well, there is a conversation within and of itself there, because I might argue that if men got the things that they wanted, that they thought they wanted, they might not actually like it. Grass is greener on the other side syndrome.
Like what things? What are you talking about?
Like you said you would enjoy having women send you pictures of themselves. Let's say you started at your youth over again as a man, but this time we're in an alternate universe where women are the ones that are always sexually forward. And women are sexually forward for you for your entire life from the age of 14 to 25. You too would kind of get sick of the
right, but in your hypothetical, I wouldn't be a man with a male sexuality. You've just made me a woman, and you've made the women men in your hypothetical. So that kind of speaks to the
yes, but in the age of feminism, that's kind of what is happening a little bit, because a lot of it is it's 50-50. It's genetic and socialization.
Well, yeah, I mean, nature and nurture is a false dichotomy.
Yes,
right? I mean, nature plays out in whatever environment nurtures it. I mean, for sure.
Yes, but I think the best way to understand the differences between men and women. So yeah, differences between men and women. This is a good segment.
Because it's fundamental, right? I mean, like,
yes.
This is my point. It's like we're saying, like, quite rightly, we need to be more aware of how men are offensive and intimidating towards women. Not exclusively, but primarily that's the way it goes. And I'm saying, unless a man understands a woman and a woman understands a man, we're not going to be able to, your earlier point, solve that problem. And
so
I think as a culture, we don't want to talk about men and women as these, different, but we need to, because.
So yes, let's put them, the best way to do that, to understand the differences between men and women, is to have analogies that put each other in each other's shoes, so to speak.
I'm not sure, okay, but be careful with that, because I'm not sure as a man, try me, yeah.
So this is an example I've talked about you before, okay? So women in general, they like dominant men, okay? We did the evolutionary biology example with mate selection, where generally for hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, women have been selected for their ability to organize, to take care of children, to manage things, to be very orderly, whereas men have been picked to be strong hunter-gatherers, more dominant, protective types. So we see that both in mate selection through hundreds of thousands of years of evolution today, in general with men, and we also see it in the socialization of men and women in culture. So if men always like to use, a lot of men I hear like to say women like to be dominated. They want a man who's dominant and assertive and strong, which is very true. But they overblow it a lot. And I think a good example of showing what it's like from the women's point of view is to say that men who are not in tune with the emotions, so a lot of times they don't know this, they're attracted to women and they don't know why they're attracted to women because they're not as in tune with their emotions. But the reason is because they're very orderly and they're very strict and they have schedules and
I think you're putting too much weight on that. I don't think any man, even if you get him to think about it, what is it that you really like about this woman and you lead him there? You even lead him to what you're saying. He's going to say, well, actually, I like the fact that she likes to keep schedules. I just don't think it's a thing.
Well, what about men? Men generally like women that don't want them. Is that not true? They like people that it's hard for them to get. They have to work for them.
Sure, yeah.
And the reason they have to work for them plays in with the maturity, structure, that type of poise that women have.
I would say poise is very different from structure and from schedules. I think you're mixing up lots of different things.
Is being assertive different than dominance? They're different, but they're in the same category of traits that men generally have because of evolutionary biology.
I think they're much closer together than poise is to liking schedules. A lot closer.
Well, think of the stereotypical man. Like when you think of just jokes that they make overblown of men, isn't it the man on the couch drinking beer? I mean, what about here's a perfect example right here. If I have to do this, what's the obsession with secretaries? Why do men love secretaries? Why is secretary porn and fetishization, that's a weird word, of secretaries? What is that?
Hold on. I'm not seeing how that relates to the thing you just said before, but that
scheduling. Scheduling, orderliness.
No, it's the power polarity. It's the power polarity.
I think is, as much as I believe there's some truths in feminism, I think that's one of the one that's why the woman likes the man. The secretary likes the man in that situation because of the power dynamic. Yes. Women understand the power dynamic.
Oh,
they make the false assumption. They make the
okay. You're asking what the attraction is to the man of the secretary.
Women make the false assumption that because women like men who are powerful, men like the women because they get to assert their power. But really, men tend to like women who are nurturing, caring, orderly, schedulely, all those things that have to do with
hold on.
Structure.
I see what you mean. I want to take schedulely out of that because you be caring and nurturing and have a P-type personality rather than a J-type personality. I don't think.
That's true. That's true.
Let's just take. I think I see where you're going. Now, what you mean? So caring and nurturing, absolutely, yes.
So, but a secretary is basically the ideal. An ideal woman that a man would like, because they're very ordered. They keep things.
Again, you're going back to the order. You're going back to the J-type personalities, and I don't think it's.
But what does a secretary do? What's her job? To keep schedules.
I think there might be something in, as it were, there is something formal about a secretary and the relationship a secretary has it within the workplace, right? It's quite a formalized thing.
What about a maid? What does a maid do? She cleans.
And so there's something hot about subverting the norm, right? A lot of sexuality is about desire overwhelming the structure. And I think that's true, but it's not the fact that the secretary is, it's that.
I think those are things that society imposes on to try to justify or explain why. But
what's the thing that society imposes on what to explain what? I didn't understand what you.
Society imposes the power dynamic, the taboo dynamic, the workplace dynamic to explain the attraction to.
You mean it's not biological? You just said it was.
It is biological, but it's biological based on the things that I was saying, that men tend to be lazy and not ordered and not mature, and they desire a maturity aspect. They desire women that are structured and orderly.
I think they're all different. I think maturity.
It is all different because there is an individual basis, and not everyone mates according to a biological structure. But this is on average based on hundreds of thousands of years of evolution and mate selection. So men have chosen women who, and also not even choosing, but also the men who have survived hundreds of thousands of years without dying have been the more assertive, dominant types that were with the more women that were more J-type personalities, that were more, and P, that are more caring, loving, nurturing, organized, cleaning the house, making food, all these stereotypes we make about women, that's actually what men desire in women. And all these stereotypes we make about men being dominant is what men generally desire in women and women generally desire in men. So putting the thing in the other shoes, just because women like dominant, assertive men, does that mean that a man should does that mean women can say, well, what men really want is for women to take control of his life and do all of his tasks and do everything for him and be bossy and naggy and do all of those things? That's the jump.
I don't even know how you get from one to the other. I just didn't get that.
So I'm basing this off of the alt-right the alt-right's tendency to justify men being dominant towards women and making inappropriate sexual advances and being very forward because that's what women want.
Okay, so here's the bit that's missing here, I think. Yes, it is my belief and experience that in general, we're generalizing, right? That women prefer men who are authoritative, confident, those kind of qualities that you can pull around, dominant, or that thing. However, right, they only want that from a man with whom they have established mutual respect.
Yes, that's true.
To want it from that particular male. So the problem isn't that the man is doing that or doing that too much. The problem is that the man is doing that in the wrong context with the wrong woman without being whether it's being well received, whether there's a mutual attraction to that the woman wants to explore. And indeed, all things being equal, if there is, and there is some kind of attraction or relationship forming, then it is more likely that that attraction will benefit from that polarity of the male, dominance, confidence, etc., versus the female. Absolutely. What these men are doing wrong, what makes me, sorry that my gender is so awful towards women, is that these men exhibit these behaviors without limiting them by the need to respect other human beings, including in this case women. And so if you get the respect first, then this discussion about what works in terms of attraction and what doesn't kind of becomes moot. Because as long as the whole thing is playing out in a milieu of mutual respect, we're good. And I think that's what we need to go back to. We need to have men and mothers saying to men, don't disrespect anybody, least of all women. And by the way, this set of behaviors constitutes disrespect.
Yes, I think that's very true. And you brought up a really good point about establishing a connection first. I think that the sexual dynamics and the social dynamics in men and women are very complex and borderline abusable due to just how different men and women tend to be and how they kind of complete each other and help each other in the areas that they're struggling with.
And I think also one of the fascinating things that I didn't realize until recently, and I read an article that's in my head, and I found it very helpful to me as a man, is that a lot of the qualities that cause a woman to be attracted to a man are the same qualities that will make the man abusive or offensive or aggressive in the wrong context.
Yes, and vice versa. And vice versa.
Well, no. It's much harder for a woman to deal with this than a man. Because the qualities that are going to make a woman attractive to me don't hurt me out of context. If a woman has a 0.7 waist to hip ratio, it doesn't matter what that woman's doing. That isn't going to hurt me. That can't be used against me.
Yes, but if, let's say, a woman is attacking your character, isn't that going to hurt a lot more than if a man is attacking your character because of the emotional and caring?
Oh, yeah. I mean, sure, it's true that men are much more vulnerable to the affirmation or lack of it, and affections or lack of it, of women than men in many cases. Well, especially when the man is attracted to the woman. Especially,
the K when you type K.
When you type K,
like there's when you're texting someone and someone texts you K, it's like very offensive. Instead of like typing okay or all right,
okay.
Just one K is apparently like offensive. But like if a man texts another man K, it's usually not a big deal. But if a woman texts a guy K or a man texts a woman K, it's seen as very disrespectful because men are very vulnerable and sensitive to what women say, because women are known to be the sensitive, nice, and caring types, and men are known to be the dominant types. That's
absolutely true, but I don't think the burden is on women to not text men K as it is on men not to be respectful oaths. And
you're right. Men's is way more abusable.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would like
emotional power versus physical power, really.
Yeah, and I well, sure, but I mean, I think a lot of the offensiveness. I mean, look, when a man makes an offensive remark to a woman, and I'm thinking of a few stories that a couple of women have told me recently. Obviously I don't think there's any imminent threat of harm. I don't think the offensiveness comes by virtue or depends on the fact that the man is physically stronger. It's just rude and bad manners in this sense that anybody with half a brain, even a man, like trying to empathize with a woman, should be able to empathize with the woman that is on the receiving end of that particular comment. And should be ashamed of himself for exhibiting such emotional stupidity. And as men and mothers, I just like that because of the alliteration. We should be demanding better from men. Like, I want to demand more, but make less of a deal of it, right? It's like, and what I say by that, what I'm saying there is we're making a big deal politically out of this. But I think it's a much more closer to home. How do you behave in your everyday life? It's just much more decency, human decency. And I think if we take it right back to that, and in fact, I think we should take a lot of our politics back to that. I think this has a bigger
yes. Well, they say nice guys finish last. And I think
decency isn't niceness in that sense, right?
Yes. Okay. But I feel like the reason is because men are trying to be nice in a different sense that they need to be nice. They need to be nice in a masculine sense. And being nice in a masculine sense is, if a man is shouting at a woman, going up to that man and being like, hey, don't shout at her, like protecting her, or opening doors, things like that, helping, things like that. That's how they should be nice. But men usually think of being nice as like saying nice things and like not aggressing on women, where that's not the type of niceness that
I think it comes to this. Look, if you're having if you want something sexual, also again, all things being equal, and I'm making a generalization. If you want to be sexually or romantically involved in a woman, if you have that kind of interest in her, then I believe it is the case that you need to escalate the interaction, right? You learn this in seminars as men, dating seminars. You need to escalate the interaction. But the point is to escalate it sensitively and in small steps. And then when you get a signal of not interested, you stop, because that's what a gentleman does. And it doesn't mean you're not being assertive and confident enough to escalate. But what it does mean is you don't go from here to, can I masturbate in front of you, Louis C.K.? Or, can I leer at you? All these different stories. And
asking over and over again also isn't appropriate. Until you asking over and over again, harassment, like maybe if you have a very, very close relationship with somebody, then you can get away with maybe 2 times. But like once you start asking more than 2-3 times, you start getting into a harassment.
Well, I mean, and again, I would speak to male dignity. Like, I wouldn't want to, I don't want to have an abstract argument as to whether asking somebody a question 5 times is harassment, because probably technically that would be not a difficult argument to defeat. But, at some level, as a man.
But I guess nonverbal communication too. You can say no 100 times with nonverbal communication.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely true. Yes, it's very important that we get better at this whole nonverbal communication thing. But again, you see, that's being subverted by people who want this. Like, a lot of people who want to stop this offensiveness of men towards women are on the wrong side of that, because they're saying, no, all communication about a sexual encounter or romantic encounter has to be, explicit. Like the California law that was passed, that every stage of a sexual interaction has to have verbal consent. Well, that's absurd, because that's not how most consent is negotiated. It's just
do you think that this verbal consent thing, and in fact feminism is probably a result of men not doing their jobs? because now women are forced to stand up for themselves because men weren't standing up for them.
Cause
and now we're
cause and effect. And you're talking about
Yes.
third wave feminism. We're not talking about the good feminism. We're
talking about third wave feminism, where women are being very aggressive and hating against almost all males. And it's because they have to be, because other men didn't do their job in helping women defeat bad males. So now
but this goes to your earlier point, though. Sorry, but this is really important because this hangs right. You said two things that need to be connected here. You just gave the example earlier of a man stopping another man from treating a woman badly. A lot of men in our current third wave feminist culture would be scared to do it in case the woman turns around and says, that's sexist because you're talking to a man in such a way that he has to treat a woman differently because she's a woman. Right? There's a lot of women now in our culture that are trying to normalize this idea that we can't treat women differently from men because they're women.
Yes, and it's a problem because men can easily physically abuse most women. I mean, feminism is correct in its individual sense that there are women that can defend themselves. There are women that can beat me up. There are professional kickboxers, and it's hard to believe until you actually, but so because isolated incidences, they're saying, okay, we don't need your help anymore. We'll deal with it ourselves. But apparently it's not working because you can see all the abuse. So women can't defend themselves that well against men. Even men can't defend themselves well against some men. That's why there needs to be...
Right, hold on a second here. What are we talking about now? Because if we're actually talking about physical abuse, that's a different thing from a lot of what I think...
We're talking about physical abuse and shouting and yelling.
Shouting and yelling. I mean, I think a lot of the offensive stuff doesn't get to the level of shouting or yelling. It doesn't have to be physically threatening to be extremely rude and offensive.
So how rude and offensive do you think something has to be before a man steps in against another man?
Well, I think that's a secondary question to look. If it's rude and offensive, don't do it.
Yes, that is. But it's already happened. We're already to the point of no return. So now it's up to another generation to reteach people these lessons.
It's an interesting question. Okay, to your question, it's a fair question. If I was in an environment where I saw a man behaving like that to a woman, I think again, without any other information about the hypothetical, the thing to do would be to look to the woman and say, "Are you okay?" Right, to make it clear to the woman that you are open, you're making yourself available to give her support, and I think that's the way to do the right thing in both senses, right? To be prepared to stand up to something that's wrong and to give the dignity and authority to the person who has it, right? Which is the potential victim in that situation.
Yes.
And I would, again, you see, this is what I mean. I would hope that mothers and men are training men to do that in such a situation.
But even things such as opening doors, giving up your seat for somebody else, somebody older, things like that are going away.
I'm getting, the older I get, the more old school I get, because I think, if somebody wants to I hold doors open for people. I don't care if you're a man or a woman. And if a woman doesn't like it because they think that's sexist, my response to that is just to laugh. No big deal, because I'm confident enough in myself and my motivation when it comes to opening doors that I don't have to get all upset about some crazy politics. So so there it is. We need to be built to be morally, made of just better moral fiber. And I think that means changing the cultural conversation. And I think as I say, it starts with upbringing. It isn't about a gender political conversation primarily. It's primarily about, look, that's bad manners, don't do it.
Yes, I agree. It is a manners thing in culture. And we sum that up pretty quickly. We just a lot of the points.
And the reason that, it almost sounds banal when I say it, but it isn't banal for this reason. How often do you hear people in this discourse talk about good manners. It's such an old-fashioned concept. It's almost like reactionary. And I'm like, no, it's the basis of like proper progressive attitudes.
Yeah, I think that is the solution. And that ties into a lot of other things, just like gender pronouns or nicknames or things like that too, where you shouldn't be forced to have manners. But if someone says, hey, will you call me White Tiger from now on? It's my nickname. I like people when call it. You're not forced to, but generally it would be a nice thing to be sure, buddy. I'll call you whatever you want. It ties into a lot of the manners with those.
I agree with that, of course. I would like to add something to it, though, which I think is very pertinent today. And probably we can't explore it, but I think it needs to be said. In such a situation, somebody making such a specific request, right, to be referred to in a way that doesn't come out of the norms, the prevailing norms, also needs to respect
the other person's decision.
The other person's, if the other person has a reasonable cause for discomfort, and should be prepared to discuss that.
Yes. You shouldn't if I tell someone, hey, will you call me my nickname AJ because I prefer AJ over Austin, and they say, no, I'm going to call you Austin. I can't get upset at that. Someone keeps calling me Greg, I'm like, my name's not Greg, it's Austin. It's like, yeah, whatever, Greg. Like, what am I going to do? Sue them?
No. I think you have a reason to be a bit upset because there's no good reason for somebody to do that except to not do what you want. But sometimes, right now, with all the stuff going on about gender politics, there are good reasons. I know you know because you know the whole Jordan Peterson story.
Yes.
There are good reasons.
But there wouldn't be good reasons if it wasn't for the laws that were being put in place.
I agree. Well,
so they kind of shot themselves in the foot.
There is a good reason, save for the laws, which is this. A good reason to not be comfortable doing something, even though it's legal, is because you believe it would be dishonest. And that is in play here.
But isn't all language dishonest in a way? Because it's very subjective. What if in an alternate universe everyone calls he's, she's, and she's he?
Different point. You're missing my point.
Different? Okay.
Yeah. No, dishonest is to say something that I honestly believe, rightly or wrongly, subjectivity allowed, is false.
Okay. So like if an actual man was telling you to call him she. Yeah,
and that can be and that you might be, why would anybody do that? Well, there are a number of reasons why people would do that.
Manipulating,
yeah. And it's and I've had a conversation with someone who believes he's been on the end of exactly that situation in the workplace, and that was done basically as a power play. Now, I'm not saying
but there are legitimate transgender people, and there are people, and there are legitimate manipulators. And I think it should be more common sense. I shouldn't think we should group them all together. I think we should be able to tell the difference between someone who's manipulating you into calling them she as a power dynamic. Like if I told everyone to call me she and pretended to be a girl for the power dynamic, and a legitimate transgender person. And we have 10 minutes left.
Okay.
And I don't want to get into a whole new subject. And we finished the boys girls. So let's talk about bowling.
What?
Is bowling a real sport? Do you consider it a real sport?
How did you get there? Like, have you been?
It's random. It's 10.
The last week, Austin. What?
We're going to the last 10 minutes with something random. Is bowling a real sport? What's your opinion?
Hold on. Actually, I just called you Austin. Do you want me to call you AJ?
No, you can. Nobody even calls me AJ.
Okay. Just make that up for. Okay, I got it. I mean, it's bowling a real sport. I don't know. I've never as per our last show, my friend, where everybody's discovered that I spend no time thinking about sports. You will not be surprised to know that I've never given the definition of sport a moment's thought. What do you think?
I think it's strange because all general sports share a common theme in athleticism, hand-eye coordination, speed, agility, power, strength. All of these dynamics play a role in sports.
Well, you can have sports that only have some of them, right?
Yes.
So
But
then
someone who has all of those things but has no skill in another sport is generally going to be good at other sports. So, for example, there was an episode with this YouTuber that I watch where he took data on are the carnival games, how many people won, how many people lost, odds, did all these statistics, and then he tried to figure out some tricks and tips. And he brought with him a professional baseball player who was a pitcher to do a lot of the throwing games. And the pitcher he dominated in a lot of the throwing games. He was a lot better than the average person. But when they played the basketball game, he thought, because he is good at basketball is a sport he is good at, that he was going to do better at the basketball game. But the professional baseball player actually dominated the basketball game too. Because if you're elite at one sport, you're also very, very good at other sports.
Qualities. Yeah, sure.
I'm definitely better at basketball than I am at other sports, but there's not a sport that I can say that I'm not good at. When I play soccer with people and I'm a terrible soccer player, I score goals all the time just because I'm very good at mixed martial arts, or averagely good at mixed martial arts. So I have a lot of hand-eye coordination, speed, strength, athleticism, and it translates into other sports such that I can have no skill whatsoever and still dominate people in other sports. LeBron James would dominate the majority of people in the sport that they're best at, that he's never played before. No skill whatsoever.
Yeah.
Bowling is all skill-based. It's all based on the one skill of bowling. A professional bowler isn't going to be good at any other sport that he goes into. It's more of an art or a skill. It's not very sporty to me. I'm an athletic person, and I will never be able to get above a 150. And even if I do, I'll never be able to get to above a 200, because that consistency, getting strikes 8 times in a row, has nothing to do with hand-eye coordination, strength, power. Because I swear, I put the ball in what I perceive to be the exact same spot every single time, and I'll get like one pin that isn't there. It's like, whoa, I did the exact same thing I did the last 3 times. I got 3 strikes in a row, and I did the exact same thing, and it's 8. Like, how does that happen? Because bowling is so intricate. It's a matter of centimeters that you have to be so skillful in bowling that you've bowled millions of times and you get it right in the same exact spot every single time. I don't consider it a sport. I consider it like a skill.
Okay.
That's what I think the difference is.
Okay.
But you don't have an opinion.
No, I mean, I guess you can define sport that way. I mean, I mean, it's probably it's a semantic choice, isn't it?
It's semantics versus culture. It just doesn't. It just doesn't fit within the category of all of those sports to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can see. I think you could. It would certainly be a useful way of separating out. I mean, and I'm aware. It's always been interesting to me as a Brit that the Brits seem to be unusually good at the sports that aren't athletic, right, or the non-sports, right. So, for example, brilliant at snooker. Brilliant at darts. Brilliant
What's
at
snooker?
Which is a bit athletic. Brilliant at snooker is like blown up ball.
Oh, okay.
You know, like dominated equestrianism. Dominated.
They're very skill-based sports.
Yeah, and it's but pretty rubbish at everything else. It seems to me. So the Brits, I think we topped the table in the last Olympics on a per capita basis and came something like 2nd in the world, which is like astonishing that we even have that skill base in Britain. I was amazed by it. But they're all those skill sports as opposed to
the athletic sports.
Good at, yeah.
But the athletic sports you also can have skill in. For example, basketball. Basketball is probably the one sport where I'm skillful in addition to my athleticism. But I wouldn't say I'm not good at throwing a baseball or throwing a football or other things like that, because they're just all sports are like almost the same to me. They're all super, super similar to me.
Yeah, interesting.
They all just rely on speed, strength, agility.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And then there the things I'm good at. Basketball are very, very minute things, like technical dribbling and things like that. But if someone's never played basketball in their life and they're very athletic, you just get a feel for you get a feel pretty easily for getting the ball into the basket. And you generally have more cardio than the other people, and it's just sports are very easy for athletic people, and it's not really fair because you're either like almost good at like most sports or good at no sports.
It's not unfair because there are classes of things that are easier for certain people who are made, who are wired a certain way. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people who get A grades in the liberal arts are more likely to get A grades in science than people who get F grades in liberal arts, right?
Yeah, it's all correlated.
Yeah, so you have a certain set of skills. Certain things I'm good at intellectually or mentally, I can apply them across a bunch of domains. But and similarly, I would be crap across all.
So that's why I tell people like who are bad at basketball, like how do you get so good at basketball? I'm like, go do gymnastics. If you go do gymnastics and you get good in gymnastics, you'll improve in everything, single aspect of everything.
Yeah.
So that's, people say practice every day. No, go do something that focuses on your entire body, and you'll instantly improve with almost anything.
Okay.
Gymnasts are scary.
Yeah, it's amazing what they can do.
They're very, very, like, from head to toe. They're just, they have control over everything.
I look at that and I'm going, it's almost hard for me to understand that I'm the same species, which is always fantastic. That's watching something that you can't imagine being able to do is always the most exciting thing.
I'm going on the record in saying this, that gymnastics is the most difficult sport ever, and whoever wins gold in the Olympics in gymnastics should probably be considered the best athlete, even more than swimming. And and I don't know, is that the general quo? Do you know?
Is what?
Is that the general quote that gymnastics is the most elite of all sports? Because that's my opinion.
I don't even know how you would measure things how you would compare things that are, say, qualitatively different. I see why you say it, though. I'm sympathetic to the view.
I wonder what Olympians think about it. If you asked an Olympian, what's the hardest Olympic...
in the sense that you have to be expert in all of these different physical characteristics.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense to say that. The coordination that you have to have with all parts of your body, and the range of events that they do. Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. It's incredible.
All right, well, that's our episode. We had 10 minutes of fun random talk because we got through this episode quicker. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe.
Check out my article on Huffington Post, Me Too and Robin Kerr.
And check out Robin's article. We'll link it.
And I put a couple of videos. I think I might put a video up about this on my Robin Kerr Art of Political Persuasion YouTube channel. I'm thinking about it. But check it out anyway. This whole gender Me Too thing. I've been thinking about it.
And share your responses about the whole anything that's annoyed you about this whole trend over the last
and you know what? And also what you think about what we've been saying, like things you agree with, disagree with, what you want to hear us talk more about or less about,